Hi there, cruiser confidants, V-twin virtuosos, and textbook torque troopers. It is time to put on your leather chaps and cue up some Rascal Flats or maybe some Kid Rock because we're talking about cruiser bikes today. Not everyone wants to rip up in the twisties in a full tracksuit or bust dank nooners and flip-flops on a Grom. No, some adults want to ride real bikes and experience motorcycling the way our ancestors did. Slowly, propelled forward not by horsepower but by the sense of pure freedom that comes from a grumbly V-twin engine deep beneath your loins. So today I've compiled the best cruiser motorcycles for a beginner rider. So sit back, relax, let's get into it. Okay, the first bike we have on the list today is a Harley-Davidson Street Bob. This bike has a 117 cubic inch engine, brother, weighs 700 pounds and costs 15 grand. Sounds about perfect for a beginner, right? Wrong! But that's what a sales rep at Harley-Davidson would tell you after you graduate from the Screamin' Eagle Cruiser College and get your motorcycle endorsement. Don't listen to them. They speak with lies and deception. First real bike on the list today is the humble Honda Shadow. The Shadow got a bit of a highlight in our episode about overlooked beginner bikes from earlier this week, and naturally, it deserves a rightful place at the top of this list of beginner cruisers as well. The Honda Shadow is currently produced in two variants, the Aero and the Phantom. The Aero has a classic cruiser look with plenty of chrome, swept back handlebars, and a shaft drive. The Phantom is more modern and stripped back with shorter fenders, blacked out engine components, and a low profile seat. Each bike is powered by a 745cc liquid-cooled V-twin that makes about 45 horse and 48 foot-pounds of torque, which is well within the range of what a beginner would be comfortable learning the fundamentals on. But these bikes are pretty heavy, coming in around 560 pounds, but that won't negatively affect the way these bikes are meant to be ridden. Nowhere does Honda claim the Shadow is a canyon carving machine, but these bikes are super low maintenance and reliable. And as a common cruiser for beginners, they're pretty easy to find secondhand as well. But if you're a warranty princess and need a brand new bike, the Honda Shadow Aero costs $77.99 and the Honda Shadow Phantom costs $79.99 US. Now, if you're a Honda nerd that wants a truly modern lightweight cruiser, Honda, of course, makes the Rebel line of motorcycles. For most riders, you would still probably be fine to skip the Rebel 300 and instead go straight for the Rebel 500. The 500 still features both beginner-friendly pricing as well as accessible power. The larger Rebel will offer a little bit more for you to sink your teeth into for your first few riding seasons with a little more power on tap. The new Rebel line is the modern evolution of the Rebel 250, which has been Honda's entry-level cruiser since the 80s. Big Red has pumped out thousands and thousands of these bikes over the last 40 years. They have acted as a chariot to usher mere mortals to motorcycle god status, 249 cc's at a time. Or they just get their clutches smoked out during the friction zone exercises in the hundreds of MSF courses they have participated in. Honda has finally revamped the line in 2017, which upgraded the 250 to the Rebel 300 and introed the Rebel 500. These bikes are entirely new bikes that combine a cruiser's stature and style with modern and sporty components. The Rebel 500 is a liquid-cooled 471cc parallel twin that makes power to the tune of 47 ponies and 33 foot-pounds. Unlike more traditional cruisers, the Honda 500 Rebel is a svelte machine weighing at just 420 pounds fully wet. Considering it makes the same amount of power as a Sportster Iron 883, has a 6-speed gearbox, weighs more than 100 pounds less, and costs practically half as much as the Sportster, the Rebel 500 is basically a no-brainer. The Rebel 500 also sets itself apart from other cruisers stylistically. It has a minimalist and modern aesthetic that combines cruiser classic elements with contemporary sportiness. The low-slung profile, blacked-out components, and clean lines give the Rebel 500 a unique and eye-catching appearance separate of the bulky and bloated cruisers of a more traditional flavor. The Honda Rebel 500 has an MSRP of $64.49, and if you ask me, it's my opinion of the best bike on today's video. I think it's a fair assumption to make that many new riders who are interested in cruisers are older, having caught the motorcycle bug later in life. And for an older beginner whose testosterone production has waned as their net worth has grown considerably, the amount of options for a suitable motorcycle increases as well. An older beginner will not be as restricted in the power they can responsibly handle or the amount of cash that they may be able to justify spending on a bike. If you fall into the above category, a cruiser that may satisfy your torquiest of fantasies is the Indian Scout 60. While not a bike I'd necessarily recommend for a 20-year-old whose entire income comes from the frying station at a Popeyes, it is a great option for a rider who is new to motorcycles but not new to life. The Indian Scout 60 is a more approachable iteration of the Scout platform that makes use of a 60 cubic inch or 999cc V-twin engine as opposed to the 11133cc engine in the primary model. The 999cc engine in the Scout 60 makes 78 horsepower and 68 foot-pounds of torque. These bikes are pretty analog as well without a suite of rider aids, so a new rider shouldn't anticipate this bike being a little rowdy. But the Scout motorcycles have super low seat heights and feel pretty planted at 540 pounds, so all things considered, it's a pretty confidence-inspiring ride as long as you have control of your throttle hand. These modern Indians are built well and have a fit and finish that are nice to boot, so if you're in the position where you don't want to outgrow a true beginner bike too quickly and have the cash flow for something more premium and the wisdom that age imparts onto you, the Indian Scout 60 could be the move. This motorcycle has an MSRP of $11,749. While not quite available here in the US yet, but slated to cross our borders in the near future, is the Royal Enfield Super Meteor 650. I had an early look at this motorcycle a few months ago in India. Royal Enfield was gracious enough to invite me out there to ride the Super Meteor 650 on its home turf, where I got the full Indian motorcycling experience, dodging cows on the road and all. The Super Meteor 650 is the first true cruiser Royal Enfield has made using their 648cc air-cooled twin from the INT 650. The 270-degree crankshaft gives this bike a grumbly rich feeling with character and heritage. Unlike the INT or the Continental GT that operate more in the vein of British cafe racers or roadster, the Super Meteor is true cruiser. With regards to the design, the Super Meteor 650 reflects a classic charm that harkens back to the traditional style of motorcycles. It features a teardrop-shaped fuel tank with chrome embellishments, a sculpted single-seat setup, and vintage-inspired instrumentation. These elements evoke a sense of nostalgia while maintaining functionality and ease of use. At the end of the day, one of the Royal Enfield's biggest selling points for their motorcycles are their practicality. They don't have any of the fussy electronics or advanced systems that can go awry. A lot of riders in India and other parts of the world use these motorcycles as their sole form of transportation, so having a bike that is no frills or fuss has proven advantages. Contrast to the other 650s from Royal Enfield, this motorcycle's ergonomics are designed to provide a relaxed riding position. The upright handlebars are mid-set foot pegs ensure rider comfort, allowing for better control and reduced fatigue during extended rides. Pricing hasn't been officially released for the Super Meteor in the US, but in the UK it has an MSRP of £7,300. Online speculation from motorcycle publications anticipate the cost to be around $7,500 in the US, but we will have to wait and see. If you want more info on that bike, I did a whole detailed ride and review on it. Go and check it out. While not a cruiser in the traditional sense, a burgeoning cruiser boy can find a lot to like in the Bonneville T100 from Triumph. The littlest Bonnie checks a lot of the boxes for a motorcycle that will satisfy a new rider for many years beyond their first riding season. Triumph Bonneville is the quintessential British roadster, and the T100 is very much grown-up bike in style, build quality, and fit and finish, but yet it's approachable enough for a newer rider who is maybe a little bit older. This bike is powered by Triumph's 900cc liquid-cooled 270-degree parallel twin engine that they use across multiple other platforms, including the Speed Twin and Scrambler 900 models. This engine's making 64 horsepower and 59 foot-pounds of torque. That's a good amount of power for a more mature beginner who just can't see themselves on something like a Rebel 500 or an entry-level naked bike. Style seems to be pretty important to cruiser boys, and the Bonnevilles have styles in spades. For a retro look, it has spoked wheels, dual exhaust, a sculpted tank, and a long flat seat. It looks beautiful. The suspension doesn't offer a ton in the way of adjustability, sans preload on the dual rear shocks, but the T100 does come with a Brembo caliper in the front and a Nissan in the rear. As far as cruisers go, there are some bikes geared towards beginners that still use a rear drum brake, so the addition of high-end parts on the Triumph definitely has this bike feeling like more of a keeper and less like a beginner bike you'll have a season before trading up. The Triumph Bonneville T100 will run you just shy of $11,000 at $10,955. That is a pretty penny for being considered a beginner motorcycle, but hey, everyone's situation is different. And if your budget allows it and you've got enough patience and common sense to bolster the fragility of your male ego, it wouldn't be outrageous to start on a Bonnie T100. The next beginner cruiser today is the Kawasaki Vulcan 900. What? Yam mentioned the Vulcan? You betcha, but it's not the Vulcan 650. Hear me out. Look, I've encountered countless cruiser boys who will crucify themselves for the Kawasaki Vulcan, so screw it. Kawasaki Vulcan 900 is on the list. Kawasaki also has the Vulcan S, but It's a bit of a strange bike, like I said. Is it a cruiser? Is it a naked bike? Is it a Ninja 650 trying to garner the approval of its father? Who knows? That engine doesn't really work in that bike. I feel like the Ninja 650 engine is nearly the furthest you could get from a cruiser engine, so instead, we're going for the Vulcan 900. The Vulcan 900 has been relatively the same for most of its production run since it was released in 2006. Prior to then, the Vulcan had been sold in varying displacements since 1984. The current Vulcan 900 is a 903cc engine that makes 50 horsepower and 58 foot-pounds of torque. There is no skirting around the weight of this bike, coming in at 620 pounds, but like I've said, cruiser guys are weird and evaluate their motorcycles differently than the rest of us. Oftentimes you'll hear a cruiser guy practically bragging about the sheer magnitude of his motorcycle. So maybe for some of you watching this video, 900cc, 620 pounds, and 50 horsepower are all selling points. The big four know what they're doing in regards to these metric cruisers. They're not fooling anyone with the false promises of high-speed thrills or corner carving prowess. It is a big, heavy, lumpy V-twin that takes up space, feels substantial, and costs a fraction of what a Harley-Davidson would. The Kawasaki Vulcan 900 Classic is an MSRP of $89.99, but these metric cruisers have been in production for forever, so don't be surprised if you can find a model a few years old for significantly less than MSRP. And then you can join the Vulcan forums and leave comments on every video asking, when am I going to ride one? And the last motorcycle on the list today is the Suzuki Boulevard C50. Yep, no Sportsters today. Harley-Davidson took the Evo Sportster out back behind the shed and sent it to the great bike night in the sky, where it will be called the girl's bike by all the bagger riders whose diabetes have gotten the best of them. Is the Suzuki Boulevard a cool bike? Is it a sexy bike? Does it have a distinctive je ne sais quoi? No, not really. But they've been produced by the boatload since the early 90s, so they must strike a chord with some riders. The current Boulevard best suited for beginners is the C50. It's not necessarily a beginner bike, but it's also far from an advanced motorcycle. This bike is powered by an 805cc V-twin engine that makes 45 horsepower and 45 foot-pounds of torque. While no powerhouse, the 611-pound bike is comfortable to ride with plush suspension and a seat the size of an inflatable life raft. These bikes are shaft-driven and will run forever with basically no maintenance. I bet you the valves don't go out of sync or spec in like 50,000 miles. Just run it into the ground. The C50 specifically has been made since 2001, which is a pretty substantial production window. It's a Suzuki, that's right. The Suzuki Boulevard C50 cost $8,909. Weird price. Would I suggest that a general beginner rider who's unsure of what they want on their motorcycle journey go and drop a band on a boulevard from a dealership? Probably not. But cruiser-specific people are built different, and they usually get their endorsement and they just buy the cruiser they want and just ride that forever. And in that case, a used Boulevard C50 would fit the bill quite nicely. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. Do we need more companies reinventing the cruiser the same way Honda did with the Rebel? Or is the metric cruiser destined to remain the same for another 20 years? Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed these videos, and I'll catch you later. Fact: the microwave oven was accidentally invented by Percy Spencer, an engineer working with a magnetron, a device used in radar technology during World War II in 1945. While experimenting, he noticed that a chocolate bar in his pocket had melted due to the electromagnetic waves emitted by the magnetron. This discovery led to the development of the microwave oven, revolutionizing cooking methods and becoming a ubiquitous appliance in modern households. Goodbye.
Keep watching.